"Hi, I'm Jace. My parents begged me to come home for Christmas, said the kids missed me, said the family wasn't the same without me. But the moment I walked in, they handed me a list, tossed the keys, and left for a resort vacation, leaving me with everything but an explanation." Have you ever been used by the people you trusted most? Left holding the mess they made? What time are you listening to this? And where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, I'd really love to know. The voicemail came at 11:42 p.m. I let it play twice before I even thought about responding. "Hi honey, your father misses you. He's been softer lately. And the kids? Ruby keeps drawing pictures of you. They ask when you're coming home." It was my mother's voice, the same one I'd learned to decode since I was 6. Sweet, lilting, just enough guilt to tug, but never enough to admit. I sat in the dark of my San Diego apartment, legs folded on the couch, the city below me glowing like it was trying to pretend. There was a dusty photo album next to my coffee table. I flipped it open, landed on a photo from 8 Christmases ago. My name was scribbled in glitter marker on a gift tag. Back when they still acknowledged me with pen and not silence. A part of me knew, really knew, but that part was tired of being right. So, I clicked confirm on a one-way ticket to Loveland, Colorado. My mom had said not to worry about the return flight. They'd take care of it. "Just get here. It's time, sweetheart." 2 days later, I landed in a wind-whipped terminal surrounded by people hugging tightly, holding signs, laughing into each other's shoulders. I waited for 5 minutes, then 10. No one came. My suitcase thudded against the floor as I stood outside the automatic doors, watching snow gather around my boots. I texted, "Landed." A minute later, she responded with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. The Uber ride to their house was silent, save for the driver's country playlist playing low through worn speakers. I kept my eyes on the window, tracing fog shapes with my finger. When I arrived, the front door was ajar. Laughter spilled out, high, carefree, like something from a commercial about families that don't really exist. My dad was the first to spot me. No hug, no welcome, just a dry smile and a manila folder. "Schedule's in here," he said, handing it to me like I was the nanny. "Meals are labeled. Nap time is non-negotiable. We'll be back Friday." Before I could form words, Lacey waltzed down the stairs, pulling a designer duffel behind her and adjusting her earmuffs. "Don't let them eat crayons. Again." She tossed the house keys into my open palm. "And don't forget to water the plant in Mom's room." I blinked. "Wait, what?" My mom finally emerged from the kitchen with a to-go mug in hand and a coat already zipped up. She kissed me on the cheek like I was a guest. "This is a gift, sweetie. You'll get real time with the kids. It'll be good for everyone." That night, after Ruby and Colton had fallen asleep in a pile of mismatched blankets and their half-finished gingerbread house sagged under the weight of too many gummy bears, I opened my laptop. The email she claimed to have forwarded with my return ticket wasn't there. I refreshed twice, checked spam. Then I called the airline. They confirmed what I'd already started to suspect. There was no return flight booked in my name, never had been. I sat still for a long time, the cup of tea on my nightstand gone cold. When I finally picked up my phone again, I opened the family group chat. I hovered over the thread for a few seconds. Then quietly, I hit delete. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. The kitchen felt colder that morning, not because of the snow drifting outside, but because I was starting to realize how alone I actually was in that house. I made coffee in silence. No one else was up yet. The only sound was the hum of the fridge, too loud in a house that used to echo with holiday music this time of year. My phone buzzed on the counter. A fraud alert, missed payment, a balance I didn't recognize. I froze, clicked through. It was a credit card account I'd never opened. $2,837.56 overdue. The name on it was mine, or close to it. My first name, my last name, and my middle initial, just slightly wrong. A mistake someone outside the family wouldn't make. My chest tightened, the kind of tightening that starts in your ribs and climbs to your ears. I swallowed hard, then sat down, the stool creaking under me. I wanted to believe it was a glitch. I really did. But the second I saw the address listed on the statement, that hope vanished. Lacey's. I didn't confront her, not right away. Instead, I opened my message history and scrolled until I found it. Last August, a text from my bank about suspicious activity. I had ignored it. I remember thinking, don't rock the boat, just breathe. She's your sister. And now I was holding the receipt for that silence. I typed a message to Nicole, my old roommate from before everything changed. Ever felt like someone hijacked your name and your place in the family too? She replied almost immediately, every Christmas since 2015. It made me laugh, then cry. Later that day, while Lacey was upstairs in the shower, humming along to whatever pop song she played on repeat, I slipped into her room. I didn't snoop, I searched. There was a floral patterned box inside her bottom vanity drawer. Inside it, bank statements, unopened, most addressed to her. One caught my eye. J.D. Shipman. I stared at the letters. J.D. My name, almost. I took pictures with trembling fingers. My hands weren't shaking from nerves. They were shaking from memory. Because this wasn't the first time. She forged Mom's signature in high school to get out of a detention. She once used my ID to sneak into a club when she was underage. Everyone said, it's just Lacey being Lacey. But now it was Lacey being illegal. And me being liable. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, a lukewarm mug of tea cupped in my hands. Everyone else had gone to bed. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old texts again. I found it. December 17th, last year. Can I use your info just to check my credit? Promise I won't touch anything. I never responded. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened a new message. We need to talk about something, and this time, you don't get to pretend. I didn't send it. Not yet. Dad was already on his second cup of coffee when I walked into the kitchen. He was on speakerphone, his voice a little too bright for this early in the morning. I told them it's a smart move. Everyone's looking for the next big flip. The guy's a genius. Said the returns could triple by spring. He laughed, loud and full-bodied, like he was already counting the profits. I stood frozen for a second, the sound of his words connecting dots I hadn't wanted to see. Last week, I transferred nearly $1,900 for roof repairs. He'd sent pictures of water spots on the ceiling, even mentioned a leak near the attic. I didn't question it. That was my first mistake. Now, listening to him talk about some investment opportunity like he was pitching on Shark Tank, I felt my stomach twist. When he ended the call, I asked casually, "So, did the roof guy come yesterday?" He paused. "Oh, right. Pushed it to next month. Too much snow anyway." He didn't look at me when he said it. I nodded slowly, then walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. Back in my room, I logged into the joint account we still shared. My name was technically just a cosigner, a safety net from years ago that never got undone. And there it was, a $2,000 payment labeled J&T Capital Consulting. I didn't recognize the name. I Googled it. The first result was a Reddit thread. Scam alert, J&T Capital stole my retirement, followed by a trail of horror stories, screenshots of blocked emails, and police reports. My hands went cold. Outside the window, Ruby and Colton were building a snowman. They laughed when the head slid off. I watched them press it back on, giggling like nothing in the world could fall apart. But something had. Again. That afternoon, I drove to the local grocery store for bread and milk. Halfway down aisle 3, I heard someone say my name. "Jace!" I turned to see Mr. Carlson, our old neighbor. He smiled like always, a little crooked, like he was always halfway through a dad joke. "Hey, your dad told me you're the brains behind that investment deal. Pretty gutsy. Hope it pays off." My throat went dry. "He said that?" "Yeah, said you were managing the finances now. Good for you." I smiled, tight, then mumbled something about needing to grab eggs before they sold out. I paid in silence. The bag boy asked if I wanted paper or plastic. I couldn't remember what I answered. In the parking lot, I sat behind the wheel for nearly 10 minutes, the engine off, hands still gripping the cart handle. I wasn't just being used, I was being framed. That night, after the kids were asleep and the house had gone quiet in the way only guilt can silence a space, I pulled out a spiral notebook I hadn't touched since high school, the one with glitter peeling off the cover, the one that had once held college application drafts and poems about boys who didn't matter. I flipped to a clean page. At the top, I wrote, "This is what it costs to be their daughter." Below that, I began listing every wire, every gift, every second chance I had offered and been punished for. When I got to the latest entry, I didn't write the amount. I just circled a date, December 23rd, and I wrote one word beside it, enough. I woke up before the sun that morning, the way I always did when something felt off. Not the kind of off you can name, but the kind that sits at the base of your spine and hums. I walked barefoot through the hallway, every floorboard creak louder than it should have been. The air in the house was still, too still for a home full of people. It didn't feel like silence. It felt like someone had decided not to speak. In the kitchen, Mom was folding laundry on the island, humming a hymn she used to sing when I was little. The smell of lemon detergent clung to her hands. She didn't look up when I walked in. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the table, stirred in creamer, waited. She didn't ask how I slept. No one did. We went about the morning like everything was fine, like last night's realization hadn't cracked me open, like her silence wasn't another form of choosing. Later, as I helped her prep dinner, just the two of us, peeling potatoes in practiced rhythm, I brought it up, gently. "Did Lacey ever mention borrowing my name?" She didn't pause, just shifted to the next potato. Well, maybe she didn't mean harm. I kept my hands busy, but my eyes were locked on her face. "She took out a credit card in my name," I said, quieter this time. Mom rinsed a bowl, dried it, said nothing. And that was all the answer I needed. It wasn't surprise on her face. It was fatigue. She had known. I didn't press. Not because I forgave her, but because I understood now. She wasn't unaware. She was unwilling. That afternoon, I heard Lacey upstairs, talking on speakerphone with someone. I wasn't trying to listen, but she was loud, always was. "Yeah, Mom told me not to bring it up. She didn't want to ruin Christmas." I froze on the bottom step. There it was. Said plain, no guilt, just casual, habitual cruelty. They hadn't just kept secrets. They'd conspired in silence, not to protect me, but to protect themselves from discomfort. The rest of the evening passed like a slow-moving bruise. No one noticed that I barely spoke. Or maybe they noticed and didn't care. That night, I sat with my journal open. My pen hovered over the page before I finally wrote. She didn't say it, but she chose not to say anything, and that is still a choice. I folded a photo of the two of us, me in braids, her with sun-wrinkled eyes, from a summer long gone, slipped it into an envelope, labeled it for later. It started with a favor. Dad called me into the basement while he packed for their trip, said he needed the warranty folder for the dishwasher, the one with the blue tab. I opened the filing cabinet like I'd done 100 times before, brushing past folders labeled utilities, medical, taxes. Near the back, one envelope stood out. It was thicker, older, labeled in my dad's rigid handwriting, Mortgage Docs 2020. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside the first page was a photocopy of the house deed. I scanned it once. Then again, my name wasn't there. I blinked, thinking maybe this was an outdated version. Maybe the name was just hidden on another page. But the more I flipped, the heavier my hands felt. 5 years of transfers. Every month. Rent, insurance, repairs. All of it. Mine. And my name wasn't there. I turned over the first page and saw it. The upper right corner torn, not cleanly, but with purpose. Jagged. Rushed. That's where my name should have been. The spot I had initialed the day I co-signed the refinancing agreement. I remembered because I had driven 2 hours out of my way from work to meet the notary at the kitchen table. Shaking, I opened the next drawer down. Old mail, pens without caps, dried out sticky notes. And at the very bottom, a folded scrap. Part of my signature, my first initial. A half curve of my last name. Torn, discarded. They didn't forget me. They removed me. I sat on the basement step and stared at the cold cement wall for what felt like forever. No yelling, no confrontation. Just a slow unraveling from the inside out. Upstairs, Ruby and Colton were painting ornaments. I heard their laughter before I saw them. They sat on the floor, surrounded by glitter glue and paper scraps. Ruby held one up with pride. "This one's for you," she beamed. "I wrote your name." I took it from her hands. She had written Jace in red crayon, the letters big and slightly crooked. It was the only place my name existed in that house. Later that night, back in my childhood room, the one that had become a makeshift storage space, I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank spreadsheet. At the top, I typed, assets. Then I listed everything I'd contributed over the years. Monthly transfers, emergency repairs, holiday gifts, groceries, babysitting hours. And next to house, I typed, $0, removed by those I helped. I stared at the blinking cursor. Then I looked up and caught my reflection in the window. "I'm done letting them edit me out," I said aloud softly, like a promise to someone I used to be. The cashier was ringing up my groceries when I heard my name. "Jace?" I turned, startled, and found Mrs. Everson, our neighbor from across the street, smiling politely with her tote bag of oranges. Her voice was pleasant, too light for the weight of what came next. "I hope it's okay I mention this, but I've seen the little girl. Ruby, right? She's crossed the street a few times alone. Is everything all right over there?" My hand tightened around the milk jug. "She's with me most of the time," I said. "We're managing." That wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Mrs. Everson nodded, that kind of gentle nod people give when they've already made up their minds. "Just wanted to check. I know how it gets over the holidays." I paid quickly and left, but her words followed me like wind trailing through a cracked window. That night I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, but not the comforting kind. The kind where something's been ignored too long. The next morning, I walked into the corner store. The clerk behind the register was a man in his 60s, gray-bearded and friendly. I asked if they had security cameras outside. He didn't hesitate, said yes, offered to pull footage when I mentioned I was checking on something for my niece's safety. We stood in the back room watching grainy footage from the week before. And there it was, Ruby, her small coat zipped crooked, stepping off the curb with a dollar bill in her mitten. Alone. She looked both ways, like someone had taught her, but she moved too fast, running when a delivery truck came barreling down the road. The truck braked hard, its tires screaming. She flinched, but kept going, disappeared inside the store. My knees nearly buckled. I didn't say goodbye. I just nodded and walked out, my hands shaking. At home, Lacey was sprawled on the couch, files of nail polish fanned around her like fallen leaves. The kids were upstairs napping. I stood over her, phone still in hand. "Did you know Ruby crossed the street alone last week?" She didn't even look up. "She's 6, kids figure things out." "She almost got hit." She blew on her nails, shrugged. "She didn't, though." I walked away before I could say something I wouldn't take back. Later that night, I tucked the kids into bed. Ruby asked if she could sleep with the lights on. I said yes. Then I went downstairs and opened my phone. I typed, "Call Delaney." That was all. No punctuation, no hesitation. But I didn't press send. The cursor blinked like it was waiting for me to decide who I was going to be, and I just stared. It was snowing again. The kind of soft, slow snow that didn't rush to stick, just lingered in the air like it didn't know where to land. We were sitting by the window, Ruby and Colton with markers scattered around the table, their tongues peeking from the corners of their mouths as they concentrated. Colton drew a crooked house, 3 windows, a chimney with way too much smoke. Then he started adding stick figures. "This is me," he said, pointing to the smallest one. "That's Ruby. That's you." I smiled, letting it warm me in a way I hadn't felt in weeks. Then he looked up, head tilted, eyes wide and unblinking. "Are you our real mom?" My marker stopped mid-stroke. He didn't ask it with malice or confusion, just honesty. I looked at him and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't about biology. It was about presence, safety, warm milk, clean socks, someone who stayed. And that's when I felt something shift, not in him but in me. I nodded slowly, brushing his hair back. "No, sweetheart, I'm not." He seemed okay with that answer, picked his marker back up and kept drawing. But I wasn't okay. I stood and walked quietly to the laundry room, closed the door, and cried. Not the loud, gasping kind of crying, just tears that dropped without asking. The kind that comes when you realize you've built a life for someone else without even meaning to. I remembered the first time Lacey left them with me. "Just for a few hours," she said. "That was 3 years ago, and I stayed. I became their emergency contact, their bedtime routine, their everything in all the ways that mattered." That night after dinner, I tucked Ruby in. She was curled up with the bear I'd sewn the button eye back on. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. "Can you stay forever?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. She reached out, fingers wrapping around mine. "It's quieter when you're here, and warm." I stayed until her breath slowed and her hand went limp in mine. Then I slipped out of the room and sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. Later, I picked up my phone and recorded a voice message to Lacey. "I think you forgot what being a mother means." I hit play, listened to my own voice shake. I didn't send it, just saved it to drafts. Then I opened a new browser tab, typed, "How to file for emergency guardianship," and just let it sit there. The knock came at 9:12 a.m. Sharp, deliberate. Not the kind of knock someone uses when they've come to borrow sugar. I opened the door to find a woman in a black coat, clipboard in hand, badge around her neck. "Delaney Knox, Child Protective Services." "We received a report regarding the welfare of 2 minors at this residence," she said calmly. "We understand you're the designated guardian. May we come in?" My mouth went dry. "Designated? Yes, we have documentation." I stepped aside without speaking. The hallway suddenly felt colder, the walls narrower. Delaney moved with quiet authority, the kind that didn't wait for permission it already had. In the living room, the kids were building a puzzle. Ruby waved. Colton kept humming softly to himself. Delaney sat across from me at the kitchen table and handed me a copy of the consent form. My name was there. Sort of. It looked like mine, familiar loops and curves, but it was just off enough to set off alarms in my chest. The date listed was 2 weeks ago, the signature in pen I hadn't held. I didn't need a handwriting analyst. I had lived with Lacey long enough to recognize her attempts at mimicry. She'd forged Mom's signature once to skip a field trip waiver. That was 6th grade. I stared at the paper, then back at Delaney. "I didn't sign this," I said. Delaney nodded once, noting something on her form. "I believe you," she said quietly. "I need a minute." I walked into the kitchen, no door to slam, no outlet to scream into. I leaned against the counter and pressed my fist against my ribs like I could stop something from breaking loose. When I returned, I thanked her for her time and promised to follow up with her office that afternoon. She gave me her card, her expression unreadable but not unkind. At 12:46 p.m., Lacey walked in, face flushed from a facial, keys dangling off 2 fingers like jewelry. She blinked at the silence. "What?" I held up the consent form. Her smile faltered. "You said yes," she said. "You just don't remember." I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my phone and showed her a screenshot of our last message thread. December 19th, 10:02 a.m., Lacey. "Just 2 days, please. We really need the break." Me. "Fine, but I'm not staying longer than Sunday." I turned the screen toward her. "That's what I remember." She rolled her eyes. "God, you're being so dramatic." "No," I said, my voice level. "I'm being legal." I handed her a copy of the CPS report. "You lied to the law," I said, "and now I won't protect you from what comes next." That night, after the kids were asleep and the house was quiet in that way that only follows something loud, I sat at my laptop, logged into my bank. Mortgage canceled, utilities canceled, grocery auto pay canceled. Then I set a reminder on my phone. Lawyer consult, 8 a.m. Monday. I opened my notebook one last time. On the next line beneath the last entry, I wrote, "The woman they used is gone. What's left is the woman they made." The morning felt warmer than usual, though the heater hadn't even kicked in yet. Delaney Knox stood at the doorway again, clipboard in hand, her expression unreadable. Ruby and Colton played quietly in the living room, while Lacey sat stiffly at the kitchen table, her fingers laced so tightly they looked bloodless. This time, I didn't have to say anything. I wasn't the one under review. "We no longer show Jace as the listed guardian," Delaney said, glancing at her notes. "It appears everything has been reassigned. Are you aware of the responsibilities now assigned to you?" Lacey nodded, voice barely audible. "Yes." Delaney closed her folder. Then I'll be back in 2 weeks. Provided the report is clean, we'll consider this case stabilized. Dad didn't say a word. He just stared out the window like the silence outside had something more interesting to say than we ever could. Mom busied herself rinsing a cup that didn't need washing. I didn't wait for them to speak. I just slipped on my coat, picked up my keys, and left. There was nothing left to explain. The drive back to San Diego was longer than I remembered, or maybe just quieter. I didn't play music. I let the hum of the highway fill the space between thoughts. When I walked into my apartment, it smelled faintly of lavender and something older, like time standing still. I didn't unpack right away, just dropped the small suitcase near the couch and stood there, looking around like I'd come back to someone else's life. Everything was where I left it: the books, the blanket, the unopened mail, and me, still here, finally back. I pulled out the notebook from the bottom of my bag, the one with all the numbers, all the pain I'd put into tidy rows. I flipped to the last page, tore it out, and ran it through the shredder. I didn't need it anymore. Not because it didn't happen, but because it no longer controlled me. In the mailbox, there was one envelope from Loveland. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's. Inside, the deed to the house. No letter, no apology, just a sticky note, pale yellow, with 6 words written in shaky ink. Do what you need with this. Folded inside that was something smaller. Construction paper, bent at the corners. Ruby's drawing, stick figures again. Me, Ruby, Colton. A sun in the top corner. Below it, blocky crayon letters. DI is home. I pressed the paper to my chest, then walked to the kitchen and pinned it to the fridge. That night, I opened a new email draft, addressed to no one in particular. Subject: Housing Inquiry, New Beginnings Women's Center. I didn't send it yet, but I would. Later, I picked up my phone and typed out a message to Lacey. It started with, "You'll never understand what you cost me?" I stared at the blinking cursor for a while, then I deleted it. Some things don't need to be said to be done. Before bed, I opened the window a crack. The air was cool, soft, still. The sky was gray, but it was mine now. Sometimes, family isn't where you come from. It's who chooses to stay. I spent years bending myself into the shape they needed, thinking love meant sacrifice and silence. But I've learned something. Boundaries are not bitterness. Walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing yourself when no one else will. If you've ever felt like the invisible one in your family, I want you to know you're not alone. And your story doesn't end in their silence. It begins in your voice. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between peace and people you love? Let me know in the comments. If this story touched something in you, drop a or just tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you believe stories like this matter, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Let's keep healing together.